The slap came so fast I didn't see her hand move. 1 second. I was reaching to pull my aunt's designer handbag off the lit gas stove burner. The next, I was on the cold tile floor, my cheeks searing, my ears ringing, my mouth full of the metallic taste of blood and the scent of expensive perfume, while she stood over me, screaming I was a freeloading thief. A tiny red dot blinked silently in the hallway corner. It recorded every second. That camera wasn't mine. I didn't know it existed, but it was about to save my career, my freedom, and burn down the life she'd spent so many years building. Riley Monroe. That is the name I am trying to remember. I am 28 years old, and right now my name is a useless collection of syllables because all I can hear is the high-pitched whine that replaced the sound of the slap. I am sprawled on the kitchen floor of my Aunt Vivian Crowell's townhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. The tile is a slick, glossy white, shot through with veins of gray marble, and it is brutally cold against my right cheek. I can taste blood, metallic and thin, mixing with the overwhelming, sickly sweet cloud of Vivian's signature scent, a ridiculously expensive French perfume she calls joyeux. It is not a joyful smell right now. It is the smell of violence. My ears are still ringing so loudly that Vivian's voice, even at the volume she is using, sounds distant and distorted, like a corrupted broadcast, but the words are still sharp enough to cut through the white noise. "You absolute parasitic thief," she is screeching. I can feel the vibrations of her rage through the floor. "You dared to put your greedy hands on my bag, my emerald Monceau. After everything I have done for you, you try to steal from me? You are garbage, Riley, utter, ungrateful garbage." She is a figure of fury, standing over me, her posture rigid. Vivian is in her early 50s, but she works hard to maintain the appearance of a woman who just turned 40. Today, she is wearing a cream silk dress, a massive gold watch, and enough pearl jewelry to bankroll a small college student's tuition for a full year. Her face, usually a mask of serene, controlled perfection, is blotchy and red. In her arms, she clutches the object of this explosive, unhinged display, the emerald green designer purse. It is a new purchase, a ridiculous, structured thing that costs more than my entire annual rent budget. If I actually paid rent here, she holds it against her chest like a shield, or maybe a child, protecting it from the contamination of my touch. This is not the first time. The thought is numb, a familiar click in the filing cabinet of my mind. Vivian has hit me before, always when she is drunk, always a quick, sharp shove, or a pinching grip on my arm that leaves a bruise the size of a lemon. But this was different. This was a wide, open-handed, full-power strike that felt like a baseball bat connecting with my jaw. There was no control in it, no reservation. It was entirely unhinged, and it was all because of the purse. Stupid, my mind whispers, the cold floor sucking the heat out of my cheek. It's always about the things, isn't it? I try to move, to roll off the floor and sit up. My neck is stiff, and a shooting pain flares from my jaw down to my collarbone. As I push myself up onto my elbows, Vivian reacts instantly. She lunges, not to help, but to restrain. Her perfectly manicured fingers, tipped with a pale pink polish, curl around my wrist and yank. It is a vicious, surprising pull that rips me off the floor and sends me staggering backward. Before I can regain my balance, she puts her shoulder into me, driving me into the solid wood of the kitchen cabinet behind me. Thwack! The air rushes out of my lungs, and a fresh wave of pain erupts in my already protesting ribs. The smell of French polish and cleaning products hits my nose. "Don't you dare get up!" she screams, her voice cracking now, dangerously close. "You stay right there and listen to me. I took you in when your mother died. You were a 16-year-old orphan with nothing. Nothing, Riley. I clothed you. I fed you. I gave you this roof over your head in one of the most desirable communities in Cleveland for over 10 years. You owe me everything. Everything." The recitation of debt is a well-worn script, one I've heard countless times, but never delivered with such physical force. Every word is a hammer blow, justifying the violence. I owe her the air I breathe, the tile I just kissed, the cabinet I'm currently indenting with my shoulder blade. I am dizzy. I need to explain. I need to stop the noise. I manage, the words slurring slightly around my swollen lip. I was only pulling it away from the burner. Viv, you left it on the counter, right next to the stove. The gas was still lit. It was going to scorch your bag. My explanation is simple, rational, and true. She had been making a late-night tea, forgotten the kettle, and wandered off, leaving the gas burner on a low, blue flame. The emerald bag, placed carelessly, had a stray paper receipt dangling inches from the heat. I had walked in, smelled the gas, seen the danger, and acted without thinking. Vivian doesn't hear the word gas. She only hears bag. Lies, she shrieks, spitting the word out like a curse. She releases my wrist and gestures wildly with her free hand. You came home. You saw your chance. You saw my Monceau. The receipt was hanging out. And you thought, my chance to stick my hand in and see if there's cash or cards. You wanted to know what I keep in there, didn't you, you little snoop? You were prying. Her ability to instantly, seamlessly twist reality is breathtaking, even in this state of shock. My basic reflex to prevent a $5,000 bag from catching fire is instantly reframed into an attempted felony. As I slump back against the cabinet, trying to steady my spinning head, my cheap smartphone slips from my grasp. It doesn't drop heavily. It just glides on the polished tile, frictionlessly, and rolls toward the kitchen doorway, crossing the threshold into the dimly lit hallway. The phone stops perhaps a foot from the doorframe, and that is when I see it. The camera. It is mounted high in the corner of the hallway, a small, matte black dome, almost flush with the ceiling. It is nearly invisible against the dark paint of the trim, but on its face, a single, tiny red light is winking on and off, steadily. Blink, blink, blink. It is recording. I stare at the dot. It is the only stationary, controlled thing in the universe right now. Everything else is movement, noise, pain, and fury. The little red light is quiet, passive, and utterly truthful. A distant memory surfaces, a forgotten piece of data. About 1 week ago, the building's landlord, Mr. Carver, had sent a generic-looking email. Subject: security system upgrade following minor mailbox theft. He'd mentioned installing new high-definition hallway surveillance cameras at all entrances for enhanced resident safety. I'd skimmed it, deleted it, and gone back to finishing a 40-page financial report for Northline Apex Consulting, where I work as an analyst. Now, that dot, that dull, tiny red pinprick of light, suddenly seems brighter than the crystal chandelier hanging over the dining room table. It is absorbing everything. The high-pitched, hysterical edge of Vivian's voice, the loud thwack of my body against the cabinet, the shuddering gasp I let out. Vivian, oblivious to the recording witness, steps closer, her face looming large and distorted, smelling heavily of perfume and spite. She leans in, lowering her voice, but not its intensity. This is the calculated threat, the cold layer beneath the hot rage. Listen to me, Riley, she hisses, her voice vibrating with malice. If you dare breathe a word of this to your pathetic friends, to the HR department at that glorified accounting firm, to anyone, I will call the police first. I will tell them you attacked me. I will tell them you grabbed my bag, shoved me to the floor, and I was merely defending myself. She straightens, smoothing the non-existent wrinkles from her cream silk dress. The performance is back, the mask solidifying, even though her hands are still trembling slightly around the emerald bag. And who do you think they will believe? Sweetie? She asks, the word sweetie dripping with acid. A reputable, well-known businesswoman in this community, a pillar of society, a volunteer on the Arts Council, who has a home, investments, and a steady reputation, or a penniless assistant who lives off her charity and has a history of emotional instability. She makes air quotes around the last two words. Everyone will believe me. I will make sure your story sounds like the desperate, pathetic lie it is. You will be arrested before your bruised cheek stops hurting. Say one word, and I will destroy your life, your career, everything. Do you understand? I feel a warm trickle on my lip. I lift a hand, my fingers still shaking from the impact, and touch the corner of my mouth. A smear of red comes away. Blood. Her fury has drawn blood this time. My eyes drop from the angry, trembling hand clutching the $5,000 bag to the distant, steady, blinking red dot. The small, silent witness. The red dot records the sound of my slow, ragged intake of breath, the beat of my terrified but rapidly shifting heart, and the terrible, damning certainty of Vivian's threat. And for the first time in what feels like 12 years of emotional servitude, a cold, hard thought cuts through the haze of pain. This won't just stay in the kitchen anymore. Vivian has made her biggest mistake. She has brought her cruelty out into the light, onto the record. With a final, disgusted sniff, she turns sharply on her heel. The sound of her expensive Italian leather heels clicking rapidly on the tile floor diminishes as she sweeps out of the kitchen, through the dining room, and presumably to the living room or her office, the emerald bag still tucked securely beneath her arm. She doesn't look back. She doesn't offer a word of comfort or an ice pack. She simply leaves me. I remain in the fetal position against the cabinet, too stunned, too winded, and too terrified to move. The adrenaline rush begins to recede, replaced by a cold wave of nausea and the deep, throbbing ache that spreads across the right side of my face. But now, my eyes aren't closed, and I'm not focused on the pain. I am focused entirely on the small black dome of the security camera, just outside the threshold. The red dot continues its silent, relentless work. Blink, blink, blink. Pain, fear, but beneath those familiar sensations, a tiny, hard seed of something else begins to form, a crystalline thought that feels like the first breath of winter air. Vivian's carefully constructed life is built on an image, a narrative, and a lie, and in the corner of her own hallway, that lie might have just been recorded. The thought of revenge, cold and meticulously planned, begins to swirl around the data point of the red dot, the simple reality of the camera, a piece of surveillance tech installed for the protection of property, might just be the instrument of my liberation. It is the ultimate, cosmic irony, a hidden camera, intended to catch thieves breaking in, just recorded a crime happening within. I stay there for a long time, the cold tile soothing the raw heat of my cheek, listening to the echoing silence of the expensive, perfectly clean house. The red dot is still blinking. My revenge starts there. With that one, quiet, undeniable fact. The one fact she can't twist. A video, a record. I know what you said. I know what you did. And now, someone else does too. The metallic taste of my own blood in my mouth is no longer disgusting. It is galvanizing. It is a promise. It is the taste of 28 years of passive submission finally giving way to calculated, cold, analytical rage. I am an analyst by trade. I hunt for anomalies, for fraud, for the tiny data points that reveal the entire rigged system. I just found the biggest, most undeniable anomaly of my life, blinking quietly just outside the door. I will not stop until I use it. I will use the facts. I will use the numbers. I will use her own words, captured by her landlord's security upgrade, to take back the years of servitude and the tens of thousands of dollars she took from me. I will use the footage, the sound, the undeniable timestamp, and the whole house will burn. The cold of the tile, still pressed against my cheek where I finally dared to shift, acts like a stark, sharp compress on the swelling. It pulls me out of the immediate pain of the present, pushing me backward, through the 12 years of silence and service that led to the slap. The red dot in the hallway is the future, a path to action, but the raw, throbbing ache is the past, the long, slow root system of dependency and exploitation that has finally exploded into violence. I am 16 years old again, wearing a black dress that felt too grown up and too stiff. The air in the funeral parlor was thick with the scent of cheap lilies and forced sympathy. I am standing next to my mother's closed casket. Her death had been sudden, quick, mercifully brief for her, but a catastrophic implosion for my existence. A hand, perfectly gloved, and smelling faintly of that same joyeux perfume, clamps onto my elbow and steers me away from the small cluster of family friends. It is Vivian, my mother's younger sister, immaculate, composed, already moving forward while the rest of us were still stuck in the crushing gravity of grief. "Come here, Riley," she said, her voice low and efficient. "We need to talk logistics." We stopped in an alcove near a fountain where a plaster angel cried silent tears. I was looking at the angel, but Vivian was looking at her perfectly manicured nails. "Look, I'm your closest living relative," she stated, all business. "The house is gone, obviously. The insurance is minimal. I've signed the temporary guardianship papers. You can come stay with me. It's temporary. Of course, until you can get on your feet, until you can take care of yourself. Don't worry, you'll have a roof over your head. It's what your mother would have wanted." The phrase, "it's what your mother would have wanted," was the golden key, the unquestionable authorization for everything that followed. I didn't hear the word temporary, I only heard the promise of a roof, and I felt a wave of crushing, debilitating gratitude. That was the transaction, shelter for debt. I moved into the pristine, gated community, into the sparkling, perpetually tidy townhouse. It felt like moving into a museum exhibit. Every piece of furniture was pale, expensive, and intimidatingly clean. I slept in the guest room, which was really just a massive linen closet with a skylight, and for the first few months, I was cripplingly grateful. I was determined to be the perfect, invisible guest. I would be quiet. I would study hard. Above all, I would help. At first, the requests were small, wrapped in comforting, familial language. "We're family, darling. Just throw your aunt's towels in the wash with yours, won't you? Can you quickly rinse those dishes? I have a big call in 10 minutes. I'm running late for my book club. Would you mind popping down to the grocery for some milk?" It was always just a little help. It was always framed as family. It started with dishes and laundry. It quickly graduated to folding Vivian's elaborate wardrobe, running errands that involved waiting in line at the post office for 45 minutes, and sorting her complicated filing system. When I started driving at 17, I became her personal chauffeur. All of this while I was still trying to manage high school, a part-time job at a bookstore, and the emotional wreckage of losing my mother. The escalation was insidious, a slow boil. By the time I started college at a local university on a partial scholarship, I was essentially a full-time, unpaid domestic manager. My day would start at 6 in the morning prepping Vivian's power smoothie and end at 11:30 at night once I had cleaned up the kitchen after the dinner I had cooked and run through her next day's schedule on the huge digital calendar she kept on the wall. I remember one specific morning. I was 18, home from my first semester, and I was frantically trying to finish a massive term paper while simultaneously sorting Vivian's closet, which she had exploded onto the floor. "Riley, darling, your mind seems elsewhere," Vivian had said, perched on a velvet ottoman, watching me work. "I'm just trying to make my deadline. Aunt Viv, I have 3,000 words left to go." Vivian had laughed, a light, dismissive sound. She picked up a silk scarf, examining it for wrinkles. "You'll get it done. You're good at details. You're good at supporting. Some people are born to stand in the background and support. Honey, not everyone is meant for center stage. Look at me. I'm the center stage. And you're the brilliant stage manager that makes the whole show run smoothly." She called it a compliment. I heard the assignment. I heard the clear, non-negotiable definition of my role in her life. I was the support structure. I was the backdrop. I was the anonymous engine running her glamorous, chaotic machine. I was never meant to be a star. I was the help. As the years blurred, the roles cemented, I finished college, graduating summa cum laude, fueled by caffeine and pure, terrified determination not to fail. The house was my prison, and my degree was supposed to be my escape key. When I got the offer for the highly competitive analyst training program at Northline Apex Consulting, the exact kind of corporate job Vivian always boasted about having access to, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. I called her, shaking with relief and pride. Vivian listened to the news, smiled, and then immediately claimed the credit. See, Riley? This is our success, she announced to a friend on speakerphone later that day. All those years I spent instilling discipline, making sure she knew the value of hard work and routine, it paid off. They love her diligence. I molded her. I gave her the framework for that kind of success. She didn't mention the 80-hour weeks I spent juggling classes and chores, or the 4 years I spent without a real summer vacation. She didn't mention the tears I cried over spreadsheets at 3 a.m. The triumph wasn't mine. It was hers. It was a testament to her excellent management. The job, which should have been my liberation, became another weight in the scale of my debt. I was making a solid, professional salary, certainly enough to afford a modest studio apartment downtown. But every time I brought it up, the emotional blackmail machine started up again. I was looking at a lovely little studio on Elm Street. It's tiny, but it's affordable. I'd say, trying to sound casual, confident. Vivian would suddenly look wounded, her eyes welling up instantly. Elm Street? You want to go live in that tiny little box? After everything I've given you? After I saved you from becoming a ward of the state? Are you going to abandon your family after all that, Riley? Do you think your mother would be proud to see you walk out on me now? I'm alone here. You're going to just turn your back on me? The guilt was crippling, paralyzing. The financial debt was theoretical, but the emotional debt, the I saved you debt, was a real, physical chain. I would back down, apologize, and start researching new recipes for the week instead. Then came the financial control, the most sophisticated step in her system. About 2 years ago, shortly after I started at Northline Apex, Vivian suggested the shared expense account. It's silly for us to have 2 separate accounts paying for one house, she reasoned. We'll open a joint account. You transfer half of your paycheck every month. That covers your utilities, the property taxes, the maintenance. It's only fair, right? It sounded reasonable on the surface, but the account was solely in her name, with me as an authorized user, which, as I quickly learned, meant I could put money in. But I had virtually no control over where it went. I never saw clear, itemized statements. I never saw the full scope of the spending. Whenever I asked, she'd snap. Do you think I'm cheating you, Riley? I'm paying the mortgage. The property tax alone is thousands of dollars every quarter. Just trust me. I had trusted her every month. A huge chunk, sometimes more than 50%, of my hard-earned salary vanished into the black hole of the shared expense. The culmination of this control was evident in the social perception. Vivian loved to host. She threw lavish cocktail parties for her investment club ladies and her various charitable boards. I became part of the scenery at these events. I would spend 8 hours before the party cleaning, setting up, and preparing the gourmet food. During the party, I was the one who answered the door, took the guests' coats, mixed the complicated cocktails, and passed the appetizers. I was never introduced as a financial analyst. I was introduced as my brilliant niece, Riley, who helps me out so much around the house. In the eyes of her friends and neighbors, the men and women who drove their luxury cars past the security gate, I wasn't the brilliant girl who worked 60 hours a week at a prestigious consulting firm. I was the help, the quiet, efficient young woman who cleared their plates, served their drinks, and knew exactly where the expensive liquor was stored. It was a misconception Vivian was careful never to correct, reinforcing my designated place in her shadow. Now, as I push myself up off the kitchen floor, wincing from the bruise blooming on my cheek and ribs, my eyes catch the cold gleam of the emerald bag Vivian had just been clutching, the bag that cost thousands of dollars. And I remember the story she told everyone about it. "This is the only thing, ladies," she had boasted a few weeks ago at a brunch, rotating the bag slowly so the light caught the leather. "The only thing I bought purely for myself, without thinking of anyone else, just for Vivian." The emerald bag was a symbol of her selfishness, a physical manifestation of her declaration of autonomy and privilege. It was her totem, a constant, shimmering reminder that while she was entitled to buy things purely for herself, I, Riley, was permanently tied to thinking only of her needs first. The bag was the last boundary, and when I reached for it, instinctively trying to protect it from a fire, she saw not an act of service, but an act of violation. She saw the help daring to touch the master's prize. The throbbing pain in my cheek is not just the physical injury, it's the final, violent punctuation mark on 12 years of carefully constructed, coercive control. I stare at the empty doorway where she vanished. The system she built, the debt, the discipline, the shared account, the servitude, it all led to this. But this time, unlike all the times before, the whole twisted history has a silent witness outside the door, and that witness changes everything. The physical bruising on my face is beginning to fade to a sickly shade of yellow-green, but the bruises on my spirit, 12 years in the making, feel deeper than ever. I am back at the townhouse, pretending that the sheer, unbridled violence of the slap never happened. The red dot outside the door, the silent witness, is the only thing that keeps me from dissolving back into passive acceptance. Right now, the present is defined by exhaustion. My routine is a brutal, self-imposed marathon of obedience. I put in 11 or 12-hour shifts at Northline Apex, trying to prove that the job is mine and not Vivian's, only to rush home to start my second shift. I am the one who always comes home late, but I am still the one who stands over the professional-grade gas range, cooking a meticulously planned, 3-course meal. Vivian, meanwhile, is usually either on a long call in her office or, more recently, setting up for her weekly ritual, Ladies' Investment Night. This night, the oppressive atmosphere is particularly thick. The house smells of expensive cheese and the artificial scent of ocean breeze air freshener, Vivian's attempt to mask the anxiety that permeates the air. I am circulating with a heavy silver tray of miniature quiches, my work clothes still slightly wrinkled, my analyst brain still humming with numbers and spreadsheets from the office. The ladies are a group of wealthy, divorced or well-married women from the community who gather in Vivian's pristine living room, sipping her favorite Pinot Grigio, to discuss their financial portfolios and tax strategies. Vivian, elegant in a sweeping navy jumpsuit, is holding court near the fireplace, basking in the reflected glow of her faux expertise. "And my portfolio, darling, is up a solid 10% this quarter," she announces, the confidence in her voice utterly unfounded. Considering the sporadic nature of her own supposed consulting work, she waves a perfectly manicured hand at me as I drift past with the quiches. "And this is my niece, Riley. She works at Northline Apex, a real numbers girl. She helps me keep my eye on the market. Don't you, sweetie?" I manage a small, tired smile. I'm just here to make sure everyone's glasses are full. The ladies giggle politely, returning to their discussion of commodities, having successfully relegated me back to the serving staff. The introduction. Numerically talented niece who assists me is a calculated masterstroke. It leverages my genuine professional skill to burnish her image of financial acumen, while the immediate duty, serving the quiches, ensures my subordinate status is clear. I retreat toward the kitchen door, but their voices carry. I pause just out of sight, listening. One of the women, Margaret, is discussing her recent travel plans. "We just got back from Naples. Vivian, you simply must get a place there." Vivian lowers her voice conspiratorially, but not enough. "Oh, don't you worry, dear. I'm already looking at properties. We're well positioned. My retirement fund is completely topped up," I tell Riley. "We need to think long-term. Honey, complete security. Naples condo, full retirement fund." The words hit me with the quiet, chilling force of an early morning reality check. Vivian's supposed career has been a patchwork of short-term, vague consulting gigs for the last 15 years. She is constantly between projects, constantly worried about her image. Where did she get the money to have a full retirement fund, let alone be looking at properties in Italy? I stand motionless by the granite counter, the silver tray heavy in my hands. I've known for years that she was financially reckless, but this wasn't recklessness. This was evidence of something deeper, something structured. The internal questions immediately connect to the external reality of the shared expense account. I have direct access to the banking app on my phone, but only for a limited view. Recently, I'd been seeing absurd charges: $300 for an emergency plumber who never showed up, recurring overdraft fees that were simply too high, and large, round-number transfers that left the balance perpetually hovering near zero, forcing me to transfer more of my paycheck to cover the house's bills. The money wasn't just being spent, it was vanishing. I start adding the numbers up in my head. The professional analyst taking over the traumatized niece, the overdraft fees alone over the past 6 months total nearly $2,000. Why is a woman who boasts of a 10% quarterly return constantly overdrafting on basic household bills? The account, I now realize, isn't a simple shared pool for utilities. It's a hydra, a tangled, interconnected network of credit cards, loans, and other financial products, all linked to the stable, high-earning name on the account, mine, or, rather, me as the authorized user, with Vivian as the primary gatekeeper. The irony is so sharp it makes me gasp slightly. Earlier that day, at Northline Apex, I had been sitting across from my boss, Evan Ledger, a sharp, fair man in his mid-30s who runs our department. He had been reviewing my last report on a client's potential embezzlement case. "Riley, your work is outstanding," Evan had said, leaning back in his chair. "You have a unique ability to look past the surface numbers and see the pattern. The fraud is always in the pattern, isn't it? The unusual frequency of small, round-number transfers, the inexplicable recurring fees. You're built to spot the irregularity." I remember nodding, feeling a rare moment of genuine professional pride. My job, the thing I was genuinely good at, was dissecting and exposing systemic financial manipulation. The irony of that statement now pierces through the numbness left by the slap. I could meticulously dismantle a client's fraudulent $5 million shell company. Yet I hadn't dared to scrutinize the $20,000-plus hole Vivian was punching in my own bank account. I was the expert in spotting the pattern. But when the pattern was directed at me by my own family, I became willfully blind. The fear of being homeless trumped the logic of the spreadsheet. The weight of my compliance feels suddenly unbearable. I am so tired. 28 years old, highly educated, earning a good salary, yet living like an indentured servant, terrified of setting up a life 2 miles away. The only person who sees this absurdity clearly is Jada Freeman, my best friend. Jada is the pragmatic, earthy balance to Vivian's polished falsehoods. She manages a popular bar on the West Side. "You're an adult. Real," Jada had said over the phone last week, her voice gentle but firm. "You work 60 hours at your office. Why are you working another 30 at her house? Why can't you ever come out? I miss you. It's been 3 months since you've had a night off that wasn't spent running Vivian's life. Why are you so busy serving others?" I'd deflected, muttering something about the house being convenient, about the looming Christmas party. I couldn't admit the real reason. I was afraid. I was trapped by the narrative of debt, and I was perpetually on duty. If I wasn't serving her, I was betraying her. My brief daydream of escape must have shown on my face when I finally walked back into the living room, because Vivian caught my eye, and her smile instantly tightened. The next morning, when I was packing my bag for work, she struck. "You know, Riley, I've been thinking," she began, casually sipping her coffee in her silk robe. "I was telling Margaret last night how you're getting a little bit too big for your britches lately." I stopped stuffing my laptop charger into my bag. "What do you mean, Aunt Viv?" "Oh, you know, that little mention of the Elm Street apartment again, that look in your eye. You're starting to get arrogant. You're forgetting who took you in when you had nothing. You're starting to believe that salary is all yours, aren't you? It wasn't a direct order. It was a subtle psychological jab, the kind that makes you second-guess your own success. It was a reminder that any autonomy I sought would be immediately met with a calculated punishment. She was tightening the pressure valve again. Later that afternoon, when I was leaving work early to pick up linens for Vivian's upcoming massive holiday party, I ran into Mr. Henderson, one of the neighbors in the townhouse complex. He was fiddling with his mailbox. "Say, Riley," he said, tipping his hat, "did you notice the new spy cams they put in? After that little mailbox theft last month, I tell you, it's a bit much, but it makes you feel safer, doesn't it?" He pointed down the street, and then specifically toward Vivian's door. "See that little black dome there? Right next to the door. Records everything that moves outside the entrance, like being watched. But I suppose that's the point." I looked up. There it was. The small, nearly invisible camera. The one I'd dismissed in the email. The one whose tiny red light, just 24 hours later, would capture the sound of my head hitting the cupboard and the chilling malice of Vivian's voice. The irony of Mr. Henderson saying it made him feel safer was almost too much to bear. It was a security measure, a piece of surveillance data, a neutral eye, and I knew, now, that it was the key that would blow up the whole system. As the weather turned cold and the holiday season loomed, Vivian's demands became louder, more insistent. The party she forced me to organize was her grand finale for the year. "This cocktail party is good for your professional relations, Riley," she insisted. "There will be people from Northline Apex here, friends of Evans, clients. You need to network. This is your chance to shine." But the reality was, I was expected to manage the invitations, organize the catering staff, using my shared account to cover the bills, clean the house top to bottom, and then stand by the door, ensuring Vivian's glamorous image remained untarnished. I was expected to provide the framework for her brilliance, only to disappear into the background when the lights came up. The pressure cooker was screaming, the small daily stabs, the financial drain, the verbal abuse, the enforced servitude, had been building for 10 years. I was tired, financially exploited, and on the verge of emotional collapse. I had been slowly suffocated by Vivian's need for control. The only thing missing was the final, violent spark to turn this pressure cooker into a bomb, and the slap, delivered over a $5,000 emerald bag just one day ago, provided exactly that. The camera stood ready to document the explosion. The clock on the microwave read 9:47 p.m., and the house felt instantly small, hot, and dangerously silent. It was the night before Vivian's enormous annual holiday cocktail party, the event I had been planning for 4 weeks straight, and I was reeling from a 12-hour marathon at Northline Apex. My shoulders were tight, my head ached with the residue of spreadsheets, and my knuckles were white from gripping the plastic grocery bags. The contents, organic prosciutto, imported olives, specialty crackers, were purchased with my own card, money that Vivian had not yet managed to siphon off via one of her cleverly concealed linked accounts. I was running on fumes, and the only thing I wanted was to drop the groceries and collapse onto my bed for a full 5 hours of undisturbed sleep. I dumped the bags onto the island and instantly smelled it. Gas. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was distinct. The thin metallic scent that signals an open flame or an unlit burner. I spun around to the stove. Sure enough, the back burner on the right side was lit on a low, unsteady blue flame. Vivian must have put water on for tea and forgotten it, a common act of high-maintenance carelessness. But what stopped my breath was what was sitting right on the adjacent countertop, mere inches from the wavering flame, the emerald green Monceau bag. It had been carelessly tossed there, its structured shape slightly askew. The problem wasn't the bag itself, but a stray piece of paper, a long, curled receipt from the high-end boutique where Vivian had bought the bag just 2 months ago, that was dangling precariously close to the heat. The tiny, invisible heat shimmer was already starting to crisp the edge of the paper. Give it 5 minutes, and the flimsy paper would ignite. The flame would catch the leather, and the $5,000 bag would be ruined, taking a huge chunk of Vivian's precious facade with it. It was a physical reflex, entirely divorced from thought. I didn't want to touch the bag. I didn't want the debt. But the analyst in me, the person who instinctively stops a fire before it spreads, simply acted. I reached out, grabbed the thick leather handle with 2 fingers, and pulled the bag quickly, sharply, away from the stovetop, relocating it a safe 2 feet away, next to the sink. The sound of the front door opening and Vivian's voice calling out, "Riley, is that you?" came at the exact moment my fingers released the handle. She strode into the kitchen, looking refreshed and dangerously composed, dressed in a silk wrap dress. Her eyes didn't go to the lit stove burner. They didn't go to the pile of expensive groceries. They locked instantly onto my hand, still slightly raised, and the emerald bag sitting next to the sink. Her composure fractured instantly, replaced by a violent, shocking surge of pure, ugly rage. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. The sound was sharp enough to shatter glass. "What in God's name do you think you're doing with my bag?" I turned, my exhaustion instantly replaced by a jolt of defensive adrenaline. "Vivian, wait! The gas burner was on. Look!" I gestured quickly toward the low flame. The receipt was right next to it. It was going to catch fire. I just pulled it away. She took 2 rapid steps toward me, her face contorted, every line of expensive moisturizer pulling taut. She wasn't listening. She didn't want the truth. She wanted the validation of her pre-existing narrative. "Lies," she spat, stabbing a perfectly pointed finger into the air just inches from my nose. "Absolute lies. You waited until I was gone. You waited until the night before the big party, when you knew I'd have cash or cards in there. You finally showed your true colors. You were prying in my bag. I knew it. I knew you were nothing but a sneak and a thief." Her voice was rising, climbing to a hysterical pitch. The power imbalance in the room was suffocating. The trained financial analyst, was reduced to stuttering excuses about a safety hazard. She, the fake businesswoman, was now the righteous victim of attempted theft. "It was not a lie. I smelled the gas. I saved your bag from burning," I insisted, hearing the desperation in my own voice. But my words were merely fuel. She drove her finger against my forehead, a hard, sharp contact that forced me to step back. "Saved it? You violated it. You put your filthy, grabbing little hands on the one thing that is mine. You think you are entitled to everything I have. Do you know how much I paid for that bag? It cost more than you make in a full month of pretending to work." The argument had officially veered off the road of the bag and crashed headlong into the canyon of the past 10 years. This wasn't about the fire. This was about ownership, power, and the unbearable weight of my servitude. "I am not pretending to work," I whispered, my whole body shaking. Feeling the pressure building behind my eyes, I looked directly into her enraged, bulging eyes. "I work 60 hours a week, and I pay thousands of dollars into your accounts every month. I have been cleaning your messes, running your errands, and cooking your food for 10 years. This is not charity. I have paid my way." That was the line, the one single, absolute truth that I had never dared to utter, the admission that I was not a grateful orphan, but a brutally exploited tenant. The change in her face was instantaneous and terrifying. The hysteria vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "You paid?" she hissed, her face close enough for me to smell the red wine on her breath. "You think you paid? I kept you off the streets. I paid the mortgage. You had nothing. And now you're saying you paid me? Ungrateful, psychotic little brat." The slap followed instantly. The speed was shocking, the force stunning. It connected with the side of my face, sending a lightning bolt of white pain across my jaw and into my ear. My head snapped sideways, and I stumbled backward, clutching my cheek. "Ungrateful!" she screamed, her voice piercing the air. "I told you. You owe me." If you ever dare say that to anyone, if you ever claim I stole from you, I will call the police before the swelling goes down. I will say you attacked me. You lunged at the bag. And they will believe me. They will believe the respectable woman over the disturbed girl who keeps living in her house. I instinctively threw my arm up to protect my face from the anticipated follow-up blow. Seeing my defensive posture, my arm covering my head, only seemed to enrage her further. She grabbed my shoulder and shoved me violently against the refrigerator door. The metal rattled, and a carton of milk on the top shelf vibrated loudly. The sound, the thud of my body hitting the appliance, was huge. It was a sound that would carry. I collapsed, falling to the floor. My knees buckled first, and I landed in a clumsy heap. My body, exhausted and battered, did what it had been doing for years to survive the emotional abuse. It went numb. My breathing hitched, shallow and fast. I closed my eyes for a split second, trying to regain control. I could feel the cold, sharp texture of the tile beneath my palms. 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. I chanted in my mind, the old useless coping mechanism. But when I opened my eyes, the numbness broke. The kitchen door was ajar, pulled slightly open by the force of my impact, and just beyond the frame, in the dimly lit hallway, was the black dome, the security camera. It was too far away to capture the precise impact of the slap, but the sound, the thud of the shove, the absolute, unhinged pitch of Vivian's voice, the specific, terrifying threat to call the police first and frame me, that was being recorded. The tiny, silent red dot was blinking, 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 a witness, a silent, dispassionate piece of data collection. The realization was a shock of cold clarity. I stayed on the floor, my eyes fixed on the dot, not moving a muscle. Vivian, still breathing hard, stepped over me. She snatched up the emerald bag from the counter, holding it to her chest like a precious trophy. "You think you can take me on? You think you can talk to anyone?" she spat, leaning down one last time, her voice low and venomous. "If you tell a soul, Riley, I will call your boss, Evan, first thing tomorrow. I will tell him you are violent, unstable, and have severe mental health issues that pose a risk to his clients. You will lose your job, and you will walk out of here with nothing, not a dime. I will throw you out on the street penniless, and I will be laughing. Do you hear me?" She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and clicked away on her expensive heels, the sound echoing through the house, the conqueror taking her spoils. She left the groceries, the mess, the lit gas burner, and me, shaking violently on the cold, hard tile. But the fear, the shame, and the pain were no longer the only things in the room. My mind, the analytical engine that Evan Ledger praised, was wide awake. The paralysis was broken. My focus was razor sharp, fixed on the red dot outside the door. She had just provided the motive, the explicit threat, and the evidence all in one horrific, 5-minute burst. She thought she was leaving a helpless, defeated niece. She was leaving an analyst who had just been handed the core piece of data to dismantle her entire fraudulent existence. The game had changed. The passenger side window of my 10-year-old sedan was slightly fogged with my uneven breath. I sat in the complex parking lot, still shaking, staring at my reflection in the rear-view mirror. The streetlights overhead cast a sickly, yellowish glow that emphasized the angry crimson bruise already forming high on my cheekbone. It looked raw, puffy, and instantly recognizable. My hand automatically reached up to touch the injury. It was the same old, familiar gesture of self-soothing, a habit learned from years of emotional erosion. The first impulse, the learned helplessness that Vivian had so carefully cultivated for over a decade, immediately surfaced. It wasn't that serious. She was just angry. You provoked her. You should have just left the bag alone. Just go upstairs, put ice on it, and pretend it didn't happen. I tried to convince myself. I tried to gaslight myself, just as I always had. But the raw, metallic taste of blood was still in my mouth, and the throbbing in my ribs where she'd shoved me against the cabinet was deep and undeniable. This time is different. The thought cut through the comforting fog of denial, sharp and clear. This time, she didn't just shove me. She hit me full force, drew blood, and then made a calculated, explicit threat to destroy my entire professional life by framing me as a violent criminal. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. This was battery and coercion. And this time, there was the dot. The tiny, silent, unblinking record. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling on the cracked screen, and searched my old emails. Subject: Security System Upgrade. There it was, from Mr. Carver, the building manager who oversaw the entire townhome community. The email detailed the new hallway surveillance. Implemented after a minor rash of petty crimes a few weeks ago, the camera was located on the ground floor, managed from the maintenance office. A jolt of pure, reckless adrenaline, the kind that hits when you decide to fully commit to a high-risk analysis, propelled me out of the car. I walked quickly, almost running, down to the ground floor of the main building, where the small, sterile management office was located. The light was on. I knocked quickly, hard, before I could lose my nerve. Mr. Carver was a kind, quiet man in his 60s, usually preoccupied with landscaping schedules and overdue HOA fees. He looked up, surprised, then instantly concerned when he saw the state of my face. "Riley, my goodness, what happened to you?" he asked, his voice soft. I swallowed, the simple act sending a painful throb across my jaw. My voice, usually steady and precise, came out thin and shaky. "Mr. Carver, I apologize for the late hour. I need to ask you about the camera system you installed. The one outside my unit, number 412. Does it record constantly? And is there audio?" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly in professional caution. "The system is motion-activated, Riley, and yes, it captures sound. Standard protocol. We can see anything that happens outside the front doors. Are you reporting an incident?" I hesitated, struggling to force the words out. It felt like an admission of profound, abject failure to say it aloud. "Yes, I need to see the footage. From about 10 minutes ago, there was a large argument and a physical altercation. I need to know what your camera recorded." He looked from my terrified, bruised face to my trembling hands. The professional caution visibly softened into human sympathy. He nodded slowly. "Come in, Riley. Let's take a look." The maintenance office was a small, windowless room, dominated by 3 large monitors displaying static views of the complex's common areas. Mr. Carver quickly logged into the surveillance system. Navigating through a complex matrix of time codes and camera feeds, he pulled up the live feed for the hallway outside Unit 412, then started scrubbing backward. The moment he pressed play, the silence in the small room was brutally shattered by the recorded sound of Vivian's voice, already high and hysterical. The video feed was slightly grainy, and the angle, mounted high, offered a limited view, mostly the hallway carpet, the door, and the immediate area near the threshold, but the audio was chillingly clear. We sat in the dark, watching and listening to the cold, objective truth of the event. "You absolute parasitic thief. I was only pulling it away from the burner." My voice, small and pleading, sounded foreign to my own ears. "Lies, you finally showed your true colors as a thief." Then came the impact, a loud thwack that coincided with the camera catching a fleeting image. The rapid movement of Vivian's arm rising and swinging. In the next second, my body staggered violently into the frame, propelled from the kitchen, and collided with the door jamb before collapsing out of view. The sound of the cabinet impact was deep and loud. Riley Monroe, the analyst, watched Riley Monroe, the victim. The most damning evidence, however, was purely auditory. The camera zeroed in on the calculated malice in Vivian's voice. "I will call the police before the swelling goes down. I will say you attacked me. You lunged at the bag." And the final, venomous threat. "I will call your boss and tell him you are violent, unstable, and have severe mental health issues." I watched myself sitting on the floor, perfectly still, staring out into the hallway, staring directly at the camera. I felt an acute, painful detachment. For 12 years, I had convinced myself it was my fault, that I was too sensitive, that it was just a misunderstanding. But when viewed through the cold, impartial lens of the camera, it was irrefutable. It was criminal assault, intimidation, and a credible threat of career sabotage. This was not a family spat. This was abuse. Mr. Carver broke the silence. He looked gravely distressed. Riley, I'm going to save this clip immediately, he said, his voice decisive. He pulled out a small, external hard drive from his desk drawer. This needs to be secured. If you decide to pursue this legally, you need to control the data, the date, the time, the source, the chain of custody. This is solid evidence of assault and intimidation. Do you understand? I could only nod. Tears of shock and relief finally welling up in my eyes. I was no longer fighting Vivian's word against mine. I was fighting Vivian against an objective digital timestamp. As Mr. Carver began the long process of downloading the high-definition file, he rewound the footage further, just to ensure he had the proper lead-in time. The clip began about 15 minutes before the incident, showing Vivian returning home from her evening out. She paused briefly right in front of the door, adjusting the strap of the emerald bag on her shoulder. She opened the bag, rummaged inside for her keys, and as she did, the internal lining shifted. And there it was. Sticking out of one of the bag's internal pockets, nestled amongst a pile of receipts and lipstick, was a small black leather notebook. It had thin, color-coded tabs sticking out from the side, meticulously organized. The sight of it sent another, separate shockwave through me. The notebook. My mind instantly flashed back to the shared expense account fraud. I remembered seeing that exact small black ledger many times over the last 2 years. Vivian would be on a cryptic phone call, talking about account linking, transferring balances, or loan consolidation, and she would be frantically scribbling in that notebook. The moment I would walk into the room, she would snap it shut, concealing it in her bag or slipping it beneath a magazine. She always guarded it fiercely. She had told everyone, including me, that the emerald bag was her sanctuary, the only thing she owned purely for herself. Now, I understood why. It wasn't just a trophy. It was a vault. It was a secure repository for the secret financial records that she had so vehemently denied me access to. The black ledger was the key, the physical manifest of the complex, tangled web of accounts and debts she was pinning on me. It was the full, comprehensive map of her financial fraud, sitting right there inside the bag she protected with physical violence. Stepping out of the small, stuffy office 1 hour later, the cold night air felt fresh and electric. My hand was clamped tightly around the small USB drive Mr. Carver had given me. It contained the video, the audio, and the timestamp, the smoking gun of her physical violence. But more importantly, the camera, in its impartial recording of a mundane movement, had accidentally revealed the physical location of the other truth, the 10-year financial crime. Vivian's greatest security measure, the $5,000 bag, was actually the source of her greatest vulnerability. The camera didn't just record the violence, it gave me the blueprint for her destruction. The analysis was beginning. The investigation had just turned from defensive to offensive. The black ledger was the next piece of data I needed to retrieve. The morning after the slap felt like navigating a battlefield covered in landmines. I woke up on the couch, where I'd crashed after securing the USB drive, and immediately knew the game had escalated. My phone was a pulsing brick of anxiety, vibrating with missed calls and notifications. There were 5 missed calls and 2 voicemails from Vivian. The audio messages were a terrifying case study in emotional manipulation. The first, left at 3 a.m, was soaked in thick, artificial tears. "Oh, Riley, my sweetie, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I panicked about the bag. We're family. I love you. Let's just pretend this never happened. Okay? D's just a misunderstanding. Baby, call me back so we can hug it out. It was the apology of the abuser, designed to minimize the event and draw me back into the cycle of obligation. The second, left at 5:45 a.m., was ice. If you dare breathe a word of this to anyone, Riley, I will not only follow through on my promises, I will make you truly regret the day you were born. You will lose everything. You want to make this a war? You'll lose. Don't push me. Delete that ridiculous file, or I will make sure you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. In addition to Vivian's calls, there were 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I Googled one of them. It was the direct line for the law offices of Harold Boone and Associates, a high-profile corporate defense firm in downtown Cleveland. Vivian was moving fast. She had not only called the police in her mind, she had lawyered up. I arrived at Northline Apex Consulting feeling nauseous, my bruise hidden under a thick layer of concealer. I hadn't even had time to log in before my desktop screen flashed. Immediate meeting request. HR Evan Ledger, room 302. My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird desperate to escape. She had already done it. She had called Evan. Room 302 was small and cold. Evan Ledger sat at the table, looking uncomfortable, his usual sharp focus clouded with concern and something bordering on skepticism. Across from him sat Ms. Peters, the head of HR, a woman whose face was perpetually set to a neutral, legalistic calm. Riley, thank you for coming in. Ms. Peters began, her voice low and even. We received a very concerning call early this morning from someone who identified herself as a family member. Your aunt, Vivian Crowell. She alleges a recent pattern of volatile behavior on your part, specifically referencing an episode yesterday involving violence and property damage. Evan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. He looked directly at me. Riley, she claims you had an emotional outburst and assaulted her in the home, possibly related to some severe stress or mental health issues. She said she felt compelled to warn us about your stability, especially given your access to sensitive client data. The accusation, delivered in the professional, sterile air of a corporate meeting room, was breathtakingly effective. Vivian hadn't just attacked me, she had seized control of the narrative, using my professional environment as her weapon. The goal wasn't just to hurt me, it was to contaminate my reputation at the very source of my livelihood. I felt the blood drain from my face, but the cold analysis I'd honed for 10 years kicked in. I thought of the USB drive in my work bag, a tiny digital bulwark against her monstrous lie. I kept my voice low, steady, and professional, the tone I used when presenting a 7-figure fraud finding. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to that. Evan, Ms. Peters, I can confirm that my aunt and I had a severe disagreement last night. However, her account of the incident is completely and demonstrably false. I paused, letting the word demonstrably hang in the air. The townhouse complex recently installed a new, comprehensive security system. The entire altercation, including her explicit threats to my career, her physical assault against me, and her subsequent threats to frame me as mentally unstable and violent, was captured in high-definition video and audio by the hallway camera outside our unit. I saw a flicker of raw curiosity in Evan's eyes. Ms. Peters remained neutral, but she reached for a notepad, her pen ready. I was the victim of the assault and the subject of an elaborate threat to report me to the police and to you, my employer, with fabricated claims of instability. I have secured a copy of this video footage from the building manager, Mr. Carver. It is time-stamped and ready for review. I met Evan's gaze directly. If there are any concerns about my fitness to work, or any legal risk to Northline Apex Consulting based on her false claims, I am prepared to provide this objective, third-party evidence to your legal counsel immediately. I am not the threat, and I am not the unstable party in this situation. Evan, the sharp analyst who appreciated data over drama, visibly relaxed a fraction. He knew the power of verifiable video evidence versus a hysterical phone call. We appreciate your transparency, Riley, Evan said, subtly shifting the focus from HR compliance to genuine concern. Ms. Peters, we will log this as an ongoing, verifiable family dispute. Riley, please take 3 paid days off, starting now. We need you focused. However, he added, his voice dropping slightly, before you share that video widely, and especially before you speak to her or any lawyer she has hired, I strongly suggest you speak to your own counsel. He casually pushed a coaster across the table toward me, as Ms. Peters was looking down at her notes. Evan slid his thumb across the back of the coaster. A phone number and a name were scribbled in thin pencil. Sarah Ledger, legal aid. She's a family lawyer, works with victims. She's my sister. Just talk to her. Don't engage with Boone's office without your own advice. I nodded, feeling a well of gratitude so profound it almost choked me. Evan hadn't just believed me, he had provided a lifeline, trusting me immediately on the strength of the claim of objective data. I left the office immediately, the paid time off feeling less like a vacation and more like a necessary deployment into a full-scale legal war. The war began properly that evening, not with a legal brief, but in the desolate, cold air of the company parking lot. I had gone back to gather a few more things, sticking to the edge of the lot, hoping to avoid any confrontation. I didn't make it to my car. A sleek, silver SUV was idling near my sedan. The passenger window rolled down, and there was Vivian. She was wearing massive, dark sunglasses, even though the sun had set 2 hours ago. "Riley, darling, get in. We need to talk," she trilled, her voice sickeningly sweet, amplified by the cold night air. I stopped dead. I could see the few remaining employees leaving the building, bundled up against the early December chill. She had deliberately chosen this spot, at my place of work, in front of witnesses. I walked stiffly to her car, but remained standing outside the open door. "I don't think we have anything to talk about. Vivian." She laughed, a brittle, artificial sound. "Don't be ridiculous. Family fights. It happens. We just need to clear the air. Darling, don't let people outside the family get involved. Lawyers, HR, that's absurd. Come on, let's just go home and talk this out. Just you and me." She was trying to lure me back into the closed system, where her rules applied and where the camera's truth could be negotiated away. I didn't move. My eyes scanned the area. An older colleague was heading toward his truck nearby. I saw my opportunity. "I'm not getting in the car. Vivian." Her facade crumbled instantly. Her smile evaporated, replaced by a cold mask of pure threat. She didn't scream this time. She leaned in close, lowering her voice to a dangerous, sibilant whisper. "That's fine, darling. Because I don't need you to get in the car to tell you this. It's done. I won. I've already contacted everyone. I called Margaret. I called the head of the Arts Council. I called a few of your pathetic little friends. I told them you went insane. You attacked me. You tried to steal the bag, and you shoved me into the wall. Guess what? They all believe me. They all agreed I was right to warn your boss." She gave a small, vicious smile. "You know why, Riley? Because I'm the stable one. I'm the successful one. I'm the one with the assets. You're the poor, unstable orphan I took in. You lose. It's a lesson in humility. Sweetie, you were getting arrogant." She was utterly confident, bathing in the knowledge of her untouchable social status. The image of the rich, stable aunt always beat the reality of the unstable, poor niece. She truly believed that social currency would defeat objective truth every single time. My heart was pounding, the fear still present, but now mixed with a thrilling, electrifying wave of defiance. This was the moment. She had just confirmed she had completely destroyed her own credibility with her lies. I straightened up, meeting her enraged eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke in a calm, clear, even tone, the tone of a person stating a verifiable fact. "Vivian, you shouldn't have done that in front of the camera." The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. The blood drained from her face, leaving her a ghastly white beneath the heavy makeup. Her eyes, magnified behind the sunglasses, widened in raw, unadulterated terror. the sudden shift, the knowledge that I wasn't just guessing, but knew that she had been recorded, wiped the arrogance clean off her face. For the first time, I had pierced her shield. She stammered, grabbing the steering wheel. What camera? What are you talking about?" I just stared back, letting the silent knowledge speak for itself. I didn't need to elaborate. The fact that the little red dot existed and that I had the footage was enough. "I'm not discussing this with you further," I said, turning away, walking toward my car. "I will be in touch through counsel. Please do not contact me at my work or try to approach me again." As I drove away, I saw the silver SUV still sitting there, frozen in the cold night air. Vivian was no longer smiling. She was terrified. The game was no longer about her social narrative. It was about my data. And I was holding the key piece of evidence. The fear was still a dull ache in my chest, but it was finally overshadowed by the sharp, invigorating focus of professional necessity. I was no longer Riley the victim. I was Riley the analyst, gathering evidence for my most important, most personal case yet. The lifeline Evan Ledger had thrown me led directly to the Legal Aid Center, where I met Maya Torres. Maya was in her late 30s, sharp, but with an approachable warmth that immediately put me at ease. She didn't have Vivian's polished facade. She had the kind of calm, steady composure that comes from fighting uphill battles every single day. I sat in her small office, clutching the USB drive, and told her everything. The story spilled out, not as a desperate narrative of a frightened girl, but as a chronology of coercive control, starting with the closed casket 12 years ago, running through the slow, insidious increase in unpaid labor, the financial drain of the shared expense account, and culminating in the violence and explicit threats. Maya listened without interruption. Her focus absolute. She didn't judge me for staying. She didn't question why a financially independent woman hadn't simply walked out the door. She understood that my imprisonment had been psychological, cemented by guilt and the constant narrative of the "I saved you" debt. When I finished, Maya leaned forward, her expression resolute. "Riley, you have options, and you have power. What you described is a clear case of assault and battery, for which we can file a police report and seek a protective order immediately. On the civil side, we can explore claims for unjust enrichment and financial exploitation. What Vivian did is not just family trouble, it's a systematic pattern of coercive control that included financial abuse. She stressed the importance of meticulous documentation. We need every single piece of data you have. Think like an analyst, not like a niece. We need paper trails, screenshots, timelines, everything." Then, the crucial moment. We reviewed the footage. Maya plugged in the USB and watched the chaotic 5-minute clip. Her face tightened as Vivian's voice rose to a terrifying shriek. When the camera caught the sound of the slap, the jarring thwack, and the explicit threat to call the police first, Maya nodded slowly. "The angle is imperfect, yes, but the audio is gold," she stated, professional and calm. "The combination of the physical evidence, the sudden movement, the impact sounds, with her direct threat to frame you, gives this overwhelming weight. It demolishes her claims that you were the aggressor. We have your protective order right here." Under Maya's instruction, I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering the digital fragments of my life. I sent her every screenshot, my full bank statements showing the recurring, large transfers into the black hole shared account, text messages from Vivian demanding I pay for a last-minute flight or a new luxury rug, and, most damningly, the occasional slip-up texts where Vivian referenced using my credit score for a small loan or a quick line of credit. It was during this forensic deep dive that the true scope of the financial exploitation hit me. I accessed my credit report, something I hadn't seriously looked at in 3 years, trusting Vivian's vague assurances that she was managing my financial profile perfectly. The shock was immediate and nauseating. There were 2 new credit cards I had never opened, both maxed out, and a $10,000 personal loan I knew nothing about. All the billing addresses were tied to the townhome, and the contact phone numbers were all Vivian's burner line. She hadn't just been using my money, she had been using my identity and my good credit score, the hard-won symbol of my independence, as her own unlimited line of credit. It was textbook financial fraud and identity theft. Back at Northline Apex, Evan continued his silent support. He called me, ostensibly to check on my health, but he also subtly adjusted my department's caseload. He assigned me several internal training documents detailing case studies on high-profile corporate embezzlement and, pointedly, a report on domestic financial control patterns. The similarities were staggering. The isolation, the control over documentation, the use of joint accounts as a front for personal debt, the psychological conditioning that makes the victim doubt their own senses. I was seeing my life through the professional filter of a case file, and suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. My escape hatch during this overwhelming process was Jada Freeman. Jada didn't try to offer advice or judgment. She offered a safe harbor. I took the 3 days of paid leave Evan offered and didn't return to the townhome, staying instead on Jada's remarkably comfortable, battered leather sofa above her bar. Sleeping there was the first truly quiet rest I'd had in years. There were no silent footfalls in the hallway. No need to be instantly alert for the sound of Vivian's imperious voice demanding a 4 a.m. cup of tea or a forgotten file. The only sound was the distant, muffled pulse of city traffic, which felt liberating. One night, sitting in Jada's small, cluttered, real living room, I finally opened a clean Excel file. Client, Riley Monroe. Case, financial recovery and separation. I started inputting the data, listing everything I could remember since I turned 18. Direct contributions to shared account. Sum of 51 monthly transfers over 4 years. Total, $64,000. Unpaid labor value. Estimated 20 hours a week of cooking, cleaning, and personal assistance for 10 years. Calculated at the minimum wage rate for the area. Total, $93,000. Unpaid loans/expenses. Direct bills paid for Vivian. Total, $7,500. Confirmed fraudulent debt, credit cards, loans. Total, $32,000. The grand total, the conservative estimate of the monetary and labor debt Vivian owed me, was hundreds of thousands of dollars. The realization was a staggering blow of grief and anger. I hadn't just been a guest. I had been a literal asset, a source of income and free labor, worth more than many of her actual clients. Maya, reviewing my meticulous Excel file, was thrilled. This is exactly what we need. Riley, you've built a comprehensive profile of her dependency on you. This isn't just about the slap. This is about establishing a pattern of long-term economic exploitation. She encouraged me to shift my mental state completely. Stop thinking about escaping, Riley. Start thinking about the destination. Where are you going? Where is the life you deserve? The answer was immediate. A small apartment, a place where my key opened only my door, where my name was the only one on the mailbox, where no one could hold my paycheck, my credit card, or an emerald bag over my head again. Jada's bar was in a bustling, eclectic part of the city. Above it, there was a small, charmingly quirky one-bedroom apartment that had been vacant for 3 months. It was tiny. The rent was manageable on my own salary, and it had the best quality of all, independence. With Maya's firm backing and Evan's implicit support giving me confidence, I signed the lease on that apartment. I paid the security deposit and the first month's rent with a clean, separate bank account that Vivian didn't even know existed. The smell of fresh paint and old wood in the empty space felt like oxygen after 12 years of holding my breath. I scheduled the moving date in 10 days, coordinating the plan with Maya. The timing had to be precise, ensuring that Vivian was distracted and that I had the legal steps in place before I permanently pulled the plug on her source of supply. The move was no longer a desperate flight. It was a strategic withdrawal of a critical asset. The analysis was complete. The evidence was secured. Now came the final execution of the plan. The analytical phase was over. Now came the execution. Maya Torres was clear. A quiet escape was emotionally satisfying, but legally reckless. If I simply vanished, Vivian would instantly deploy her most powerful weapon, her reputation, claiming I had abandoned the home, stolen her possessions, and run away due to my instability. She would win the social war before I could fire the first shot. We need to establish the official record while you are still legally a resident there, Maya instructed me over the phone. The moment you move out, you give her the opportunity to control the narrative of your departure. We need to be the first voice the police hear. So, 4 days after the slap, and with the USB drive secured in my inner pocket, I walked into the Cleveland Police Precinct. My hands trembled, not from fear of the police, but from the raw, exposed feeling of breaking the sacred, terrifying rule of the abuser. You never tell anyone. I sat in a small, stark interview room and showed the footage to the attending officer. He was a young man, professional and stoic, but his expression visibly hardened as he listened to Vivian's voice screaming the threats. When the sound of the slap and the subsequent thud resonated from the speakers, the officer winced, his focus total. He reviewed the file, noting the timestamp and the clear audio of Vivian threatening to call the police first to frame me for assault. "This is serious, Ms. Monroe," he confirmed, his pencil scratching against the report form. "The video and audio evidence corroborates your account of assault and a credible threat of false reporting and career damage. We will file the report and assign a detective." This official statement was the foundation, the victim's truth, supported by objective data. Immediately after the police report was filed, Maya moved with the efficiency of a seasoned general. She filed a petition for a temporary restraining order and a full protective order, submitting the police report, the video evidence, and my initial findings on the financial exploitation as supporting documents. The court responded quickly, recognizing the urgency of the situation given the threat of career sabotage. The judge set a hearing date for the protective order in 7 days, which would force Vivian to appear in court and face the allegations under oath. The moment of strategic counterattack arrived 2 days later. Vivian, completely oblivious to the police report and the court filing, was hosting her ladies' investment night again. She was busy polishing her flawless, untouchable image. A court process server arrived at the townhouse at 7 o'clock p.m. sharp. He stood on the polished front steps and handed Vivian the thick sheaf of court documents, the summons, the protective order petition, and the notice of hearing. Riley wasn't there to witness it, but the fallout was immediate and spectacular. Vivian, cornered on her own pristine doorstep in front of her most important social peers, completely lost control. The process server, a neutral third party, only confirmed that she was the target of a legal proceeding. According to the flurry of screenshots I later received from Jada, who was getting texts from mutual acquaintances, Vivian's reaction was pure, undiluted fury. She stood on the porch, screaming at the departing server, shouting, "That ungrateful, freeloading bitch! She's trying to destroy my life over a simple family argument. She's stealing from me. That insane little runaway is trying to frame me." Her composure was gone. Her silk dress, her perfect jewelry, her expensive home, all of it was momentarily eclipsed by the ugly, raw spectacle of her public meltdown. The perfect veneer, carefully maintained for 2 decades, cracked wide open. Vivian's phone immediately exploded with calls and messages, but now, the response from her circle was fragmented. Some friends still blindly supported her, but others, who had heard the frantic, unhinged screaming echoing across the complex, suddenly paused. They had seen the disparity between the composed, wealthy businesswoman and the woman standing on her porch, raging against a court official. The crack had appeared. Vivian's response to the legal action was predictable. A furious barrage of texts and voicemails. "You will regret this. You are going to burn. My lawyers will ruin you. You're lying about the money. You are trying to steal the house." Following Maya's strict instruction, I did not reply to a single message. I let Vivian scream into the void. The silence was my greatest weapon. Each message was not harassment. It was a self-incriminating data point, proving the escalation and the continued pattern of psychological violence and retaliation. Instead of fighting, I quietly built my case. Gathering external witnesses, I spoke to Jada, my unwavering emotional anchor, who was ready to testify about the long history of servitude and my inability to leave the house. I contacted Mr. Carver, who, seeing the court documents, was firm in his willingness to testify to the authenticity of the video footage and the timestamp. I even managed to speak to a few neutral neighbors who had clearly heard the raised voices and the thud of the physical altercation the night of the slap. Evan Ledger, without prompting, sent a formal professional letter to Maya's office, confirming my employment, my stable, highly professional demeanor, and my excellent track record in fraud detection. He also ensured that the Northline Apex HR department formally logged the content of Vivian's suspicious early morning phone call, detailing her false and harmful allegations. This was crucial. Vivian could never claim she hadn't interfered with my career. The record was now official. Maya outlined the core strategy. Vivian will try to paint you as erratic, violent, and financially delusional, that you're talking crazy talk about money, but your evidence is three-dimensional. When she claims you attacked her, we show the video. When she claims you're delusional about money, we show the Excel sheet with your transfers and the fraudulent credit accounts opened in your name. We use her own threats and her own behavior to prove that she is the perpetrator of a systematic, calculated abuse. My final act of self-emancipation was also a cold, calculated legal step. The day before the protective order hearing, I made my move. I rented the smallest moving truck I could find, parked it at Jada's bar, and went back to the townhome. I was not alone. A uniformed police officer, acting on the newly issued temporary restraining order, stood just inside the doorframe, ensuring my safety and documenting my actions. Vivian was gone, ostensibly preparing for her court appearance with her lawyer, Harold Boone. I moved with the speed and efficiency I used to clear my desk after a successful audit. I packed only my essential possessions, my clothing, my books, and my professional equipment. Nothing that could remotely be claimed as Vivian's property was touched. 4 hours later, the small room was empty. My final moment came at the threshold. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the single set of keys to the townhouse. I placed them gently on the polished marble floor of the hallway, right in front of the door. The police officer documented the action. It was symbolic, final, and legally clean. I was leaving by my own will, under the protection of the law, and I was leaving nothing behind. "The process is complete, officer," I said, my voice steady, feeling a deep, quiet sense of triumph. I closed the door to the expensive, suffocating house one last time. I had shed the skin of the victim. The next day, in the cold formality of the courtroom, I would face Vivian not as her niece, but as the plaintiff, armed with data, audio, video, and the full weight of the law. The game of control was over. The trial of truth was about to begin. The days leading up to the protective order hearing were a psychological warfare designed to break my resolve. Vivian, realizing the official police report and court summons could not be dismissed, abandoned the social assault and reverted to her most ancient, insidious weapon, the claim of familial intimacy. 3 days before the hearing, I received a call from an unlisted number. It was Vivian's voice, hushed and overwhelmingly sweet. "Riley, honey, please, let's talk about this like family. This is ugly. You don't want this to be public. Think about your job. Sweetie, you're doing so well. Don't you think they'll question your judgment when they see you dragged me to court? Don't ruin your reputation over a misunderstanding. Just drop the order, and we can sort the money out. Just us." The plea was a calculated trap. Think about your job. Think about your reputation. She was leveraging the very thing she had threatened to destroy, aiming to trigger my learned instinct for self-preservation through obedience. I did not return the call. When the sweetness failed, Vivian escalated. She called Mark, my distant cousin, the only family connection I still loosely maintained on my father's side. Mark was a decent, simple man who worked in construction 2 states over and had no idea about the true dynamics of the townhome. Mark showed up unannounced at Jada's bar the next night. He was clearly uncomfortable. "Riley, what is going on?" he asked, sitting stiffly in a corner booth while Jada discreetly kept people away. "Vivian called me, sobbing. She said you are trying to frame her and put her in jail over a fight. She says you've been unstable and have a history of rage. She begged me to testify that you have a temper." The echo of Vivian's lies, spoken through the mouth of a relative I trusted, felt like a fresh sting. It challenged my reality, just as she intended. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself with emotion. I countered with fact. "Mark, I would never ask you to lie for me, and I won't lie to you. She is lying. I have the video. I have the financial documents that prove she's been using my credit. I will show you everything. All $32,000 of fraudulent debt opened in my name. I will show you the video of her hitting me and threatening my career. Just look at the evidence." He refused to look at the USB drive or the printed financial statements I offered. The family narrative was too strong. But as he left, his face was pale, his eyes troubled. The seed of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would grow. It was the first crack in the family facade. The night before the hearing, the tension became terrifyingly physical. At 11:15 p.m., I received a frantic call from Mr. Carver. "Riley, someone broke into the office," he exclaimed, his voice shaking. "They didn't touch the rent checks or the cash box. They went straight for the filing cabinets and the server room, the small drawer where I keep the external hard drives. It was pried open. They were looking for something specific." My blood ran cold. I immediately understood. Vivian knew I had the video, but she didn't know where the backup was. She had sent someone to destroy the only piece of objective data she couldn't simply gaslight or manipulate in court. The sudden violent invasion of the management office felt like a violation of my own skin. The fear of being hunted, of facing an opponent willing to commit felony burglary to silence me was overwhelming. But Maya had anticipated her desperation. "The video, Mr. Carver, is the original copy of the video still on the hard drive?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No, thank God," he replied, relief flooding his tone. "Remember how you asked me to back it up somewhere safe? I uploaded the file to my personal cloud drive on my home computer hours after you left. The USB drive is the only physical copy that was in that office." The relief was dizzying. Her desperate, criminal act had failed. The evidence was safe, hidden where she could never find it. The burglary was proof that she feared the video more than anything else, and that she was now fully exposed as a woman willing to cross legal lines to maintain her control. I barely slept. My mind replayed the scene constantly. Vivian on the stand, tearful, swearing on her pearls that I was insane, watching the judge's face soften, believing her polished, victimized performance. I had data, but she had charisma. Then, just as I was dressing in my most professional suit to head to the courthouse, a text message arrived from Mark. From Mark. "I looked up the public record on that credit card. You were telling the truth. I watched the video you showed Jada. I will not be testifying for her. If you want, I'll be there for you." It was a small text, but it felt like a tidal wave of vindication. The truth, backed by 2 pieces of data, the credit report and the video, had finally broken the family code of silence. I texted back, "Thank you, Mark. That means everything." The courthouse corridor was cold, imposing, and quiet. Maya met me outside the courtroom doors, her expression calm. "She's here," Maya whispered, nodding toward the end of the hall. Vivian was everything she had perfected. She wore a fitted charcoal suit. Her hair was elegantly coiled, and her pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She was flanked by Harold Boone, her expensive attorney, who looked every bit the confident corporate lawyer. Vivian was holding Harold's arm, projecting the image of a respectable woman, a victim, traumatized by the betrayal of a wayward relative. For a chilling, heart-stopping second, the old Riley resurfaced, I saw her face, so polished and so familiar, and the urge to retreat, to apologize, to make the bad things go away by simply conceding, was overwhelming. Just tell Maya to drop it. Say you made a mistake. Then, my hand instinctively closed around the plastic of the USB drive in my pocket. I remembered her voice, captured on the recording. If you ever dare say that to anyone, I will call the police before the swelling goes down. I remembered the $32,000 of debt she had accrued in my name. I remembered the bruise still tender on my cheek. The old instinct dissolved. The analyst took over, fortified by the truth. I looked at Maya, my jaw set. I'm ready. Let's go. I walked past Vivian and her attorney, my head held high, my eyes fixed forward. For the first time in 12 years, I was walking into a room where Vivian did not control the seating chart, the agenda, or the ultimate judgment. I was walking into a room where my data, not her narrative, would prevail. The courtroom was small, and the air was thick with tension. Vivian's attorney, Harold Boone, opened with the predictable narrative, painting Riley as a troubled young woman, struggling with emotional issues who had lashed out at her charitable, devoted aunt. Boone, sleek and utterly confident, described the incident as a minor scuffle over a personal item. He claimed Riley had aggressively lunged at the emerald bag, implying theft, and Vivian, in a moment of maternal defense, had simply tried to restrain her, which resulted in the regrettable, accidental contact that caused the bruise. Vivian then took the stand. She was magnificent, dressed in her pearl and cashmere uniform. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief as she recounted the sheer sacrifice she made to take me in after my mother died 12 years ago. Her voice broke as she described the pain of being dragged to court by the very child I saved. All over a trivial disagreement. She was the picture of respectable, wounded nobility. My heart hammered, acknowledging the power of her performance. She was convincing the judge just as she had convinced me, my family, and our entire social circle for years. Then, Maya Torres stood up, calm, steady, and utterly relentless. She introduced the critical piece of evidence, the hallway surveillance footage, already authenticated by Mr. Carver's brief testimony. Your Honor, we request to play the audio and video recording of the incident that our client alleges constitutes assault, battery, and criminal intimidation. The judge, a formidable woman in her late 50s, nodded curtly. The courtroom fell into a deafening silence as the clerk adjusted the speaker volume. The raw audio from the night of the slap flooded the small room. The contrast between Vivian's current refined demeanor and the audio's hysterical rage was immediate and brutal. "You absolute parasitic thief," Vivian's recorded voice shrieked. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. The audio continued, laying bare the true dynamic. We heard the explicit threats. "If you ever dare say that to anyone, I will call the police before the swelling goes down." We heard her claim that she would frame me as psychotic. The grainy video showed only a chaotic blur of motion, but it perfectly corroborated the audio. The sudden, visible lurch of Vivian's arm, my body stumbling into the frame, the loud thud of my collision with the cabinet, and my subsequent paralyzed silence. Vivian, seated next to Boone, was forced to watch and listen to her own worst self. The sophisticated mask shattered. She stopped crying. Her face went slack, revealing the raw, frightened animal beneath the pearls. The woman on the screen was not a respectable matron. She was a bully who screamed, "You owe me your life," and weaponized the law. Maya didn't let the moment pass. She pivoted sharply to the financial evidence, proving the motive for Vivian's desperate control. She presented the spreadsheets, the bank statements detailing $64,000 in unexplained transfers, and the evidence of the fraudulent lines of credit totaling $32,000 opened in my name. "Ms. Crowell has claimed this was a simple family fight," Maya stated, her voice slicing through the tense air. "But the audio proves she threatened my client with professional ruin to protect something, and the documents prove what that something was, A long-term pattern of financial exploitation and identity abuse, where my client was used as an asset to service Miss Crowell's personal debts. Under Maya's sharp procedural questioning, Vivian became flustered. She tried to maintain the high ground, sputtering. "I handled all the money because Riley is financially incompetent. She doesn't know how to manage a budget. I was protecting her." It was the slip Maya needed. "So you admit to managing all of her finances, placing yourself in a position of complete financial control over an adult who works as a fraud analyst?" Maya pressed. "And you also admit that you felt entitled to use her credit score and assets to pay your own bills without her knowledge or permission?" Vivian stammered, trapped between her legal risk and her own ingrained sense of entitlement. She could only manage a choked, "It was complicated." The judge had heard enough. She issued her ruling swiftly. She granted Riley a full, 1-year protective order, noting for the record the clear evidence of physical assault, documented threats of retaliation, and the alarming pattern of financial coercion revealed by the bank statements. She issued a stern, formal warning to Vivian that any attempt to contact, harass, or retaliate against me, including contacting my employer, would lead directly to criminal contempt charges. The ruling was not a Hollywood victory. It was a quiet legal ratification of my truth. The power had officially changed hands. Outside the courtroom, Mark was waiting. He walked straight up to me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I'm sorry, Riley," he said, his voice husky with shame. "I never should have listened to her. I never should have let her tell me you were the problem. I watched that video, and I realized she used those exact same lines on me when I was a kid. The ungrateful, the you owe me, the I'll tell your father you hit me. I was blind. I'm truly sorry." His apology was healing. It was the first familial acknowledgement that I hadn't been imagining it, that I hadn't been too sensitive. 2 weeks later, I stood in my new, tiny apartment above Jada's bar. The single room felt enormous and clean. The air smelled of cheap pizza and my own freedom. On the small kitchenette counter lay the final piece of the saga, the Emerald Monceau bag. It had been seized as evidence in the protective order and later retained as collateral in the civil proceedings Maya was now filing to recover the fraudulent debt. It was empty, the credit cards, the cash, the documentation all gone. I picked it up, the leather cool and heavy in my hand. It was a beautiful hollow shell. I reached inside and pulled out the small, black, color-coded notebook. The key to the financial fraud. The map of her exploitation. It was now evidence, meticulously catalogued by Maya. I flipped through the pages one last time, looking at the handwritten dates, the transfer amounts, the cruel arithmetic of my servitude. I placed the notebook back inside the bag. I added the USB drive containing the video footage next to it. Finally, I tore a strip from a receipt and, using my sharpest pen, wrote a single sentence. The final truth I had learned. You were never the problem. You were the proof. I placed the note inside the bag, zipped it shut, and put the whole thing, the beautiful, dark symbol of my captivity and my victory, into the highest, dustiest cabinet. I locked the cabinet door, the hat. I walked over to the small balcony, stepped outside, and took a deep, unrestrained breath of the cold city air. There was no magical Hollywood ending, no sudden influx of wealth, only the quiet, profound satisfaction of having built a secure future with my own hands and my own mind. The life I chose, based on data and self-determination, had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to Riley's story. I'm thrilled we could share this journey of resilience and justice with you. Let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what you thought of this chapter's intense courtroom drama. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the notification bell to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.